Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me. I'm Howie Hawkins. I'm the Green Party candidate for governor of New York. And I thought I'd spend a few minutes just talking about where we're at the campaign, and then we'll take your questions. Right now, we got 6 candidates in the race. 3 Clintonites, 3 Democrats, even though they may be running on other lines. Andrew Cuomo, Cynthia Nixon, and Stephanie Minor. And Nixon endorsed and contributed to Hillary Clinton against Bernie Sanders in 2016, and actually maxed out in donations, both the primary and the general, and added some more money to that Hillary Victory Fund, which upset the Bernie Sanders people so much because it was colluding with the DNC and biasing those primaries. So 3 Clintonites there with the status quo Democrats, and then 2 right-wingers, the Republican Molinaro and the Libertarian Sharp. And I think we're standing with the people on the issues that really concern us. I mean, wages are stagnant, and the rents and the health care costs are going up, and these other candidates don't have answers for that. But the problem we're facing is the narrative in the media is these status quo Democrats are the quote-unquote progressives or the left versus the right. And they're the status quo. We're the left. We're the alternative. And so we're calling for a Green New Deal. What we want is guaranteed health care through a single public payer system, fully funded schools, as well as an end to high stakes testing and begin to desegregate our most segregated schools in the nation, tuition-free public college, rent control, and then more affordable housing through public housing, which is more efficient in building affordable housing than giving incentives to developers, in other words, subsidies. And of course, 100% clean energy by 2030, which will be a big economic stimulus and bring down electric power rates. So we saw in Queens and the Bronx on Tuesday, a young woman running on these issues and even calling it the Green New Deal, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And I think that should give us encouragement because these issues are winning issues. She's now in an institution that I don't think she'll be able to change. Hopefully it won't change her. And if she's true to her principles, maybe she'll be with us in the Green Party in the future. But our goal is to demand more. We won reforms in 2014. We got 5% of the vote, and Cuomo had to say, how do I compete for those votes? We got a ban on fracking, movement toward the $15 minimum wage, and tuition-free public college, paid family leave, some criminal justice reforms. He's talking much more on the issues, although he's not acting as much as needs to bring our demands to fruition. But he moved our way. So we're demanding more. We want to win more reforms in this election, and we really want to go beyond piecemeal reform to system change, economic democracy, where people have the power in our own hands to make the kind of decisions we need to make. So that's where we're at, and I'd be happy to take questions.
Let's see, from Jean, we've got, she's saying thank you for being out there and running. And Michelle saying, hello, Governor Hawkins. Howie, how do you feel about being greeted as the next governor of New York State?
I will take it. I think, like I was said in the opening, I think it's wide open, a 6-way race with the center splitting 3 ways. And the right will get their votes, but they're a minority. And I think on the issues, once people know what we stand for and that we've been consistently for that, and we're the only ones really consistently for it, people are going to come our way. You look at the public opinion polls on things like single-payer health care, clean energy, rent control, and the people are with us. So, yeah, I could be the next governor.
Any bills for New York adoptees? And you feel about adoptee rights in New York State?
Yeah, there's legislation we've been supporting since 2014, and adoptees should be able to go out and find their birth parents, and so we're for that. And I'm not sure where it's going. I think the bill's been in the legislature, but it hasn't moved. Very few things have moved in this do-nothing legislature. So it's another reason to vote Green, because we get a big vote or even win, and that's a mandate. And legislators are then going to say, I better move with these issues or I may be next to lose my seat.
All right, Gene says, thank you for being out there and for running. What can people do to help out with the campaign as you're running for office?
Well, first of all, make a donation. My average donation in 2014 was $35. Cuomo's average donation was $3,500, 100 times more. And I had more donors, but he had a lot more money. So most of our people don't have that kind of money. In fact, I've set a limit of $2,700 as a maximum. That's the federal individual contribution limit. The state limit right now is $44,000, which is a joke. And corporations can give. It's not like the old federal restriction. And they get around it anyway through the LLC loophole or giving money to the parties for housekeeping expenses, so-called housekeeping accounts. So there really are no limits. But I'm just asking for people, to give what they can. And if a lot of people give, we'll have enough money to make this a real campaign. So that's first of all. Second of all, go on the website, howiehawkins.org, where you can donate, but you can also sign up to volunteer. And it's the standard things for campaigns. We've got to canvass voters, identify supporters, and make sure they vote on election day. There's literature you can download under the volunteer section of the website, and you can go out and hand that out to people and talk to them. It's very important that you get the names and contact information for people that are supporting us, because we want to keep communicating with people about the campaign throughout the campaign. And if we don't know, where they are or how to get a hold of them, we've wasted an opportunity. So we're taking names. You can write letters to the editor. Challenge this narrative that the status quo Democrats, whatever label they're now running under, are the left or the progressives, and tell them that the Greens are standing with the people on the issues and we need to be included in that narrative. I mean, we're really the progressive alternative in this election. So those are some of the things people can do. And if you're a researcher, there's issue research. I need help with that sometimes. If you're a writer, we got, op-eds and statements and press releases, that's keeping us busy, but we could use help with that. When you go on and volunteer on the website, you can, state the things that you can do, you're good at. If you're a fundraiser, step up, please. And mainly just get on that volunteer form and on the website, and our campaign manager will get back in touch with you. Okay, I'm going to read this aloud so other people know. A group of 5 registered Greens here. We have read and agreed with your principled eco-socialist platform and views on maintaining the independence of the Green Party. However, at a time when Cynthia Nixon and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and other Democratic socialists supportive of the Green New Deal are running and winning, we are curious about how we on the Green left might best advance these extremely unorthodox political times. Is there a way that Cynthia Nixon and Hawkins campaigns could find to work together rather than dividing progressives in New York State? We've always never subscribed to the lesser evilism and have always been skeptical of efforts to use the Democratic Party for social change. But we cannot help but feel energized by the victory of Ocasio-Cortez, by Bernie Sanders phenomenon, and the number of millennials who are running on Democratic tickets but promoting what are essentially Green values. Could you and Cynthia participate in a public forum to discuss and debate these very issues? Any plans to do so? We would be deeply interested in seeing that happen. Well, so would I. When Cynthia Nixon first announced, I invited her. I said I'd set up a forum for here in Syracuse. I have subsequently said to her campaign and all the campaigns, I'm ready to debate anywhere, anytime. Now, if Nixon stays on the ballot after the primary, the polls show right now she's going to lose by 2-1. If that happens, I would be very surprised if Working Families Party doesn't do all they can to get her off the ballot, although it's complicated, so they may be stuck with her and they'll want to get their 50,000 votes. But the Working Families Party, if they really want to change their perspective, instead of being a faction of the Democratic Party, build an independent working class party, then we definitely should talk. I actually sent a letter to their co-chairs in 2014 when many of the rank and file Working Families Party people were saying I should run for their nomination as well as the Green parties and against Cuomo because Cuomo's not popular with their base. I never got a response. I did meet Cynthia Nixon, introduced myself at a march against Cuomo's climate policies back in April. But she was non-committal when I said we should have some debates to, force Cuomo out. So that's where that stands. And then as far as Nixon being a Democratic socialist, I don't think so. She comes out of the de Blasio crowd, and de Blasio's housing policies are driving the working class out of Manhattan and Brooklyn. The rent is skyrocketing. He's upzoning poor neighborhoods, which means high rises, which have high rents, raises the rents in the whole neighborhood. He's not coming down hard on landlords that are doing even violence against tenants to get them out so they can get out from under rent regulations. And she has not distanced herself from that political milieu. In fact, her wife worked for de Blasio, and her key campaign people when she started were people that had ran de Blasio's campaign. So I think she's more the Clinton girl she said she was in 2016 presidential primary here in New York. Ocasio is, I think, different. I really like her passion, her background coming out of grassroots movements. I can understand why a young person would go for Bernie Sanders. He was really brought back sort of the New Deal Democrats who've been kind of extinct since the 1970s on some of those issues that were raised. So, I definitely want to keep the door open to her. But like I said, anytime Cynthia Nixon wants to have a discussion, I'm ready for it. All right, we got another question here. What is your take on the core corruption trials that are proceeding? Well, it's always hard to prove a quid pro quo to get this pay-to-play corruption and get verdicts. And, I've been following what they're saying day to day, and I know the prosecution closed, but then the judge was about to toss out, I think it was mail fraud, and they reopened their arguments. We'll see what happens. But to me, you keep seeing campaign contributions in and contracts and subsidies out, sometimes in close proximity in the timeline. And even if you can't prove in court a quid pro quo, to me on the face of it, that's legalized bribery. If they, this privatized election finance system is really legalized bribery. And that's why we need to get public campaign finance and give all the candidates an equal grant that can reach the people, and then let the voters decide based on, a level playing field and none of this special interest money basically biasing who gets to run and then how much they get to be heard. George asks, any plans to push for all new construction to be environmentally friendly? Solar panels, rainwater collection, etc. I believe something similar passed in California. Yeah, California is ahead of us. We have campaigned for 100% clean energy by 2030. This will be the third election, 2010, 2014, and now 2018. And thanks to efforts, particularly by our Comptroller candidate, Mark Dunlea, who helped write this legislation, we have a bill in the Assembly to do just that. And one of the timeline benchmarks in that bill is to make all new construction carbon net zero by 2020. And I don't believe it says about rainwater collection or what we have here in Onondaga County, we call it green infrastructure. So rainwater is absorbed instead of overwhelming the combined sewer and water outflows, and then the sewage runs into the creek and into the lake. But that kind of thing should definitely be supported. I think rehabbing the infrastructure that we've got, like $100 billion to fix the subways in New York, $25 billion to fix the NYCHA, the New York Public Housing Authority, And then we need more than that to expand and improve the public transit services in New York City and around the state. And we need to put more money into public housing. So, the real question is, where are we going to get the money for all this infrastructure, which will create good jobs and it'll have a multiplier effect in all kinds of, for all kinds of businesses. And the answer to that is we got to tax the 1% more. In 1980, the 1% in New York State and New York City took in 12% of all income. By 2014, the 1% took in 30% of all income in New York State and 41% of all income in New York City. And they're getting that largely through the rise in land prices, the site value, and that translates into rising rents, and then they collateralize their more valuable property into bank loans. So it goes into the banks and the landlords, and they're the ones that are, dominating the 1%. So they need to pay more taxes, a stock transfer tax, a multi-millionaires tax. In other words, we have more brackets as you get up into the millions. Now we just hit the top millionaires bracket, I think around $1 million, and then it's flat. We should have more brackets going up from there. And I think we need to look at land value taxation, tax the land site, which the owner is, owns a monopoly on that site. And the increase in value is due to public investment and other social investment around that site, not to anything the landlord does. The land was there before the landlord got ownership of it. And the increase in value there is not earned by the landlord. It's based on social investment. So that increase in value should come back to the public treasury. And that will bring down the rents and the interest and fill the treasury so we can build our infrastructure. So we need those kinds of progressive tax reforms. And I think that's where we stand out from the other candidates who don't seem to want to talk about increasing taxes on the rich. We want to increase taxes on the rich and lower taxes on earned income from wages by working people. That not only discourages work, but it burdens them. We already pay too much taxes and have very little discretionary income after we pay our taxes, our health care, our rent. And, we're lucky if we've paid all the bills at the end of the month. What are your plans for this weekend's protest to stop family separations, and why should Greens make this a priority? Well, I will be at the New York demonstration at Foley Square. The rally starts at 10 o'clock, and later on we're going to march across the Brooklyn Bridge. And but there are demonstrations all over the state and country on this day. So I urge Greens to go to them. Why should it be a priority? Because this is a humanitarian crisis. It's child abuse to separate little children from their parents and isolate them when some of them speak indigenous languages that nobody here speaks. Some of them speak Spanish, but they are in an alien culture. I mean, it's traumatizing. The co-chair of our Green Party works with children. Her name's Gloria Matera. And she said, this is doing permanent damage to these kids. I mean, this is child abuse and it should stop. And, anybody with a heart should be out there and protest. And then we got to stick with it, we just can't have episodic demonstrations. We got to put constant pressure out until this policy stops. And, what the substitute policy now is mass internment camps on a scale we did with the Japanese of these immigrants on military bases. And these are people seeking asylum. They have a legal right to ask for asylum, not to be, put off in these internment camps and wait indefinitely for some kind of proceeding. I was reading today where they're not even seeing judges face to face now, let alone have legal representation. They're doing it by video, and these proceedings take a minute, and then they're thrown out of the country. That's not the kind of country we want to have. So I urge all Greens to get out Saturday in these demonstrations. Christopher asks, I live in Far Rockaway, Queens, New York. As governor, how would you plan for areas such as here in the Rockaways for disasters such as Hurricane Sandy? Well, we should plan for the disasters. I'm not familiar with the exact logistics of Rockaway, Far Rockaway, but we have a lot of low-lying areas on the coast. And initially, given the sea rise level that we have, there needs to be some kind of barricades there to protect them. We need to stop building on the flood zones. And then we got to, do our best to get to clean energy as fast as possible so we can minimize the amount of level rise, and which will, be a problem when we get storm surges from storms that are stronger because there's more moisture in the warmer atmosphere and there's more heat in the warmer ocean. So those are some of the things that we need to do to deal with these coastal disasters that unfortunately we're going to have more and more of.
Howie, what's your take on Janus and that Supreme Court decision from this week? What does that mean for public sector workers, and also maybe your thoughts on the UPS strike? There's two labor issues in the news.
Well, the Janus decision is basically making public workers like they live in a right-to-work state. It's no longer a closed shop, it's an open shop. Dues payment, you have to opt in rather than opt out, which is currently the situation, which means the unions have to go out and talk to their workers and organize them. And I hope the unions, they're going to be divided in the public sector if they withdraw services from members that are not paying, or employees that are not paying dues but are in the bargaining unit. And that could be very bad for us. That's what the employers want. They want to divide and conquer us. So we've got to, in our unions, reach out to people and tell them why they need to be in the union and stick with the union. And, build solidarity. That may be the silver lining on this, because since we've had automatic dues checkoff, the money goes to the officers don't have to talk to us, the steward doesn't have to come around and collect the dues like they did in the 30s and 40s and before that. And so they the bureaucracy kind of detached from the members. I'm not for the Janus decision, but now that it's here, we should make the most of it and get organizing. As far as the UPS situation, we did vote for a strike authorization by 90% or so. But right now, the issue is, are we going to vote this contract, which has a lot of concessions? Are we going to vote yes or no? And so there's a big movement to vote no. And if we vote no, that sends them back to the bargaining table. And then maybe a strike becomes a possibility if we keep pushing our leadership. But unfortunately, Jimmy Hoffa Jr., the president of the union, has kicked off UPSers who were representing us off the bargaining committee because they wouldn't go for these concessions. One of them, the big one, is to have package drivers now in a second tier where they drive part-time, they work in the hub part-time, handling packages, and they get paid at a lower rate. We already have that in the hub between full-timers and part-timers. That goes back decades, but it divides us. And, equal pay for equal work is what the union should stand for. So there are real issues there. And if we keep pushing and vote the contract down, and there's supplements, every local has its own supplements, that may then eventually lead to a strike. Now, a strike, if we were organized for it, UPS would cry uncle, I think, like they did in '97 very quickly, because their system is easy to stop. They can't get the replacements for us. There are 200,000 of us working. They just can't handle that. I don't think they're organized for that. Certainly the union hasn't prepared us for a strike. But that would be, if a strike is coming, what we got to do. I know in '97 there was a lot of preparation all year. There's been no preparation this time. So the real issue there is, are the Teamsters going to vote the contract up or down? And I haven't been working there since January. I worked my last shift January 15th. I'm technically retired. But since I got pension cuts, that's a whole nother story. ERISA no longer protects multi-employer pensions, and ours is not in good financial shape. I can go back to work, losing my seniority, starting out at the bottom again, but that's the consolation. I would still get my little pension, but I'd be working too, which I may have to do if I'm not elected governor. So help me get elected governor. I don't want to be working unloading trucks for minimum wage again. So there are real issues there. People should, especially those of you who do work for UPS and our Teamsters, stay on top of that, organize your fellow workers, get that no vote out, and demand more. Another question on adoptee rights. Do you have a sense of what it would take to grant access to original birth certificates in all states? Would it require an executive order, act of Congress, or state by state? I don't know the answer to that in terms of a legal strategy. I just know that adoptees should have the right to find out who their natural parents are. It's it's a health issue as well as an issue of just having a sense of who you are and what family may be out there for you. So, but I don't know. I imagine it would take a law. I don't think it could be done by executive order because there's probably laws already affecting that issue. So the next question is, what are your thoughts about the impending home health care crisis? Given the aging of the baby boomers, the raise in wages for health care workers, and the failure of Medicaid in New York State to keep up with the payment flow for this growing demand for home health care. Well, that is a huge issue. It's a weakness of the single payer bill, which, if it would pass, would cover all medically necessary services except long-term care for 2 years. It would be handed over to a commission the governor would appoint, which would come back with a recommendation to implement within 2 years. I don't know if we should wait 2 years. Maine has a referendum this year. It's interesting. They would have rich folks pay the Social Security tax. There's a cap on Social Security taxes. Once you get, I think this year it's $118,400. Once you get there, you don't pay any more Social Security tax on income above that amount. And they figured in Maine that if the rich folks paid the Social Security tax on income above $118,400, it would be sufficient to fund quality home care for all the seniors in Maine. And Maine is disproportionately senior. And that's a referendum on the ballot in November. And it'll be interesting to see what they do there. But it's definitely something we should fund. We should take care of our elders. All of us will get there at some point. Instead, the major parties with all these deficit hawks are saying they got to cut Social Security. I mean, I remember in the 80s when they jacked up the Social Security prices, taxes, and said, you're going to pay more, but you're going to be secure. And now as I get to my Social Security, they're saying, no, we're going to have to cut you or limit your raises, change the inflation factor and things like that. That's the wrong way to go. If it weren't for Social Security, poverty rates would be much higher in this country. Your final thoughts. Oh, this is from the campaign manager. And maybe some thoughts on what you'd like to do on future live streams. Well, my final thoughts are we have a real opportunity this year, and the times demand that we step up and really push, demand more, demand a Green New Deal and all that goes with that. And, not get discouraged because of what we see, like with the, Kennedy resigning and Trump having another pick. We really got to push the Democrats to resist that until after the election. There's so many things to do. I think everybody, don't get overwhelmed. Just put it in your schedule, your commitment to being active on these issues, and do it at a pace you can sustain. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And organized people can beat the organized money, and I think that's what we got to do. As for future live streams, maybe we could put it around particular issues that people want to talk about, or we can do random questions. But I appreciate you asking the questions, and a couple of them I couldn't completely answer. I want to learn more about Far Rockaway. I want to learn more about the legal status of laws affecting adoptees, finding out who their parents and family are. So I learned from these too, and so let's do it again.